are stronger, stronger than you thought.
I am so incredibly excited to be here with you today. I have an amazing woman and friend that we have known each other for many, many years. Her name is Sandra Elia. And we're going to be talking today about one, enough is never enough. We're talking food addiction and recovery. But first, let me introduce myself. My name is Crystal Andrus Morissette, and I'm your host of simplywoman.tv. We'd love for you to join in the conversation if you're here live on Facebook. Just share your name and where you're from in the chat. You can ask any questions along the way or share your thoughts with us. We always love that. Now, let me introduce you to Sandra Elia. She's a certified food addiction counselor, a pioneer in the field of addictive eating. She runs Canada's only outpatient food addiction recovery program in medical clinics across Canada. She co-created Canada's first 28-day residential treatment program for food addiction at the Renascent Addiction Rehab Centre in Toronto. Her expertise has brought many partnerships with Sandra and many of Canada's top obesity and addiction doctors, but she knows firsthand. And usually we teach what we need to learn, and Sandra has learned it. She has so much compassion and education and inspiration for all of us. But Sandra's lived as an obese woman 15 years ago. I think this is when she made the big change in her life, but we're going to be talking about what life was like for her living as an obese woman in this world that has very little compassion for people, including biased healthcare providers who always just say things like, you got to lose weight. Everything's about losing weight. There's just so much fat shaming. Sandra's lost over 100 pounds and has kept it off, but it's not even about that. We're going to go to some really great places today. So thank you for being part of the conversation. 30 minutes and we're going to be wrapping it up. So this is going to go quickly. Sandra, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you, Crystal, for the work that you're doing and empowering women and with education. I'm delighted to be a part of it.
Oh, I'm so grateful. So Sandra, let's talk a little bit about your journey before we get into how you became a food addiction counselor and what that is and what a food addiction is. But let's first talk about your story, because it hasn't been easy.
No, it hasn't been easy. I always say my story begins where all stories begin, at conception. So when my mother was pregnant with me, she herself was living with obesity and bipolar disorder. So by virtue of being born, I already had up to a 70% chance of developing obesity myself. And I haven't had my first meal yet. And people don't really understand that concept. We're more apt to think, oh, you're tall like your mother or you're short like your father, and we don't place blame. But when it comes to weight, the finger of blame is often pointed at the person when there's a lot of contributing factors that are outside of their control. I did, as a result of my mother's mental health issues, I experienced trauma and neglect. And so that set the stage for using food for comfort. It was available and it was incredibly soothing. But I grew up in the 80s with MTV. I would watch video after video after video, and they only showed one idea of beauty. They were very tall, they were very beautiful and very thin, and they were having a good time. And then I looked at my life and I'm like, well, if I want anything like that, I have to look like them. And so started the dieting craziness, like craziness, diet after diet after diet, spending thousands of dollars. I did Nutrisystem when it came in a silver pouch. This was before microwaves. Like, I did EMS machines that were supposed to give me a six-pack while I was lying there. And then I thought I was so smart that I bought my own EMS machine, and I did Slimming Team, and on it went. And so what I did essentially in my teen years is I dieted my way into obesity. And unfortunately, that's something we don't teach our teenage girls and boys, that dieting at that young age, when your brain is so susceptible to outside factors, is often a ramp up to eating disorders and food addiction. Then I got married, but I really got married just to get out of my house. And once I left my house and the trauma of that house, I was really left with the memories, and I didn't know how to cope with any of it. And that's when my eating really took off. And I started binge eating, and I started acting like an addict. So I use food in the exact same way as somebody living with alcoholism uses alcohol. I use food to alter my state, to numb out, to not face life. And
The problem is, I just want
Mhm.
to jump in. The problem is we need to eat, right? So when
Yeah.
that's the big difference, is we need to eat. So,
Yeah.
and even I think people who aren't obese use food because food is pleasure. Food feels good.
100%.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I joke with my family, like little Julia, my youngest, is traveling around the world right now, and but she's like, I'll be home for Thanksgiving. And I said, we're going to be in Mexico on the Sunday, and we're having Thanksgiving. She's like, I wouldn't miss the food, and I laughed and said, like, we do love our food. We love the tradition around it. We love the getting, but we do love the food. So food does bring people comfort. But in your case, your body was already predisposed.
Yeah.
So you might have been eating way more than other people, but you might not have been.
Yeah. And also just to tie in the never enough. So definitely in my 20s, I never felt like I was enough.
Right.
I wasn't smart enough, pretty enough, thin enough. I wasn't giving enough. And so many of my clients struggle with, am I doing enough? And that sort of feeds this desire to take care of everyone else before ourselves. So let me make sure the kids have what they need. Let me make sure that my partner has what he or she needs to be successful. My parents are taken care of. And then once everybody's happy and taken care of, I'll take care of me.
Yeah, and I can take care of me with some cupcakes, or
yeah.
I just don't want to make it all about the food. I know you are a food addiction counselor, so we want to talk a bit about the food and what food serenity would be, but I want to talk more about what is behind it. And so we know food, let's talk about it. I remember when you were building your course.
Yeah.
You've been in each other's world for a long time, and you were in this room doing filming for one of your courses, and it was fascinating because I would sit and listen to you for hours as you were building those courses. But there's so much really that goes on in our brains that it's just so much more than just the food. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, 100%. As I was mentioning, when we don't put ourselves first, when we don't put our health and our happiness first, what ends up happening is we become exhausted and depleted. And so that's why it's often easy to turn to food for solace. And our food environment is toxic and highly addictive. And so one of the first steps I would say in recovering from food addiction is accepting yourself exactly as you are today.
And that's hard. That's hard with anything, because we live in a world that is we're never taught, like you just said, that you're ever enough, no matter what, like I was saying to you, I put on weight, I'm in my 50s and I put on some weight, and you were like, I know, but look at your life, like you have this incredible, but we're still
get any bigger.
Like it really can't get much better. But yet I still wake up in the morning and think, okay, why can't I just, the first thing I just need to get that run in. And I think, run. I was doing 30 years ago. Like at what point?
Our bodies have changed. Yeah. Exactly. And I think we need to start to have a shift in what we believe is beautiful and what is healthy. So right now in North America, 64% of the population is either living with overweight or obesity. So we got to ask ourselves, what has gone wrong?
Or listen, or is the 30% that's considered, are they, or do we have to start seeing things differently? If we know that the average size, dress size for a woman in North America, and I have in the book, the lectures, this great book, Lectures on the Psychology of Women, and this is a great lesson, a lecture by Dr. Christine Smith, and it's called Women, Weight, and Body Image. But to think like the average size is size 16 to 18 now, and yet I'm a size 12 right now, maybe a 14. And it's the biggest I've ever been. And it's just and we have to get our heads around it. It's like, there has to be a shift though and I love that we talked about, there has to be a shift in the way that we're changing the conversation about obesity, because we cannot possibly think that 64% of the population needs to be doing this every morning when they wake up. Like,
exactly. And so I hope that everyone here does away with the BMI charts because they're BS created by insurance companies. What we know, what science shows, is actually the best measure of your health is your mobility and your waist circumference. So just carrying weight in the midsection is dangerous. But if you're a woman like me who carries her weight in her butt, her thighs, her hips, God bless you. You are beautiful.
you're lucky.
Yeah, you're
I
just a
know.
different body size.
My midsection, and I'm the little, and that's horrendous. I think you were talking about how you were born and your mom was morbidly obese when you were born. And I look at some of the women in my family where I'm like, yeah, we're like little, we have little apples. We're the little apples. We're not the pears.
However, somebody who's shaped like a pear could go to the doctor and the doctor's like, I'm concerned about your weight. No, it's just a different body. Get over yourself. Right. I'm beautiful. I can celebrate my curves. And we have to open our minds to that because thin doesn't always equal healthy.
It doesn't. And when we think about what we have done, myself, when I think about what I have put my body through over the years, and not that I personally really didn't do any of the crazy stuff that some women do, from like, again, the laxatives to the, like it's saying here, as a result of feeling overweight, here I go, found 59% of primarily white college women use extreme and unhealthy measures such as fasting, vomiting, and laxatives. A study of Native American women showed that 32% fast or go without food for a day. Wow. The good news, we know it's starting to change, but large women are treated really poorly in Western society. You know, just one study showed that merely sitting next to a large woman in a waiting area resulted in poor evaluations of a male job candidate who was sitting beside her. Wow. This is known as stigma by association. Yes. People are less likely to want to associate with large people. There's a large volume of research that fat people are discriminated against in a variety of areas, from healthcare, psychotherapy, college admissions, financial support from parents, job applications, employment, because physical attractiveness is so highly valued in women. Women who are fat experience social rejection, poor self-esteem, disordered eating. And they
don't get the medical help that they deserve. So one of my biggest whys in life is I want to honor my mother's life. So I was my mother's caregiver from the age of 8. I was her translator because she didn't speak English. And I would go to the doctor and I was forced to translate fat shaming, scare tactics. And every time we left the office, she would be pushed further into her depression, pushed further into eating, unhealthy food to soothe. And then she didn't want to go back to the doctor, even when she needed to, because she knew what was waiting for her there. And so I could not save my mother. And that's something I carry with me. She died at 69 years of age. But every day I work with clients that I love. When I work with doctors, they're always like, you take on the hard cases. You take on the ones we don't know how to help. I'm like, yes, they are my people. Come to me. You've been struggling for 20 years. Come to me. I will love you. I will show you how to love yourself and understand that love is energizing and it's the first step, because in that way, I'm still the little girl trying to save my mom. That's my biggest why next to my daughter.
Story. I remember I've heard you share your story a few times, and it's always so passionate and purpose driven. And there's 2 stories I want you to share today. Yeah. One of them was the time that you had to call for EMS for your mother. And can you share that story?
So my mom, we were very codependent. We were in a meshed relationship. So it's a good codependent daughter. I live 5 minutes away from her. Oh my goodness, my dog's already crying. So oftentimes I would get called.
If you need to pick the puppy up, it's okay. Puppies are cute on TV too.
Oh, I know. She's really crying. I don't know what's wrong.
Okay, boo-boo.
Okay. Anyways, so I had to call 911 and my dog is in distress. I can't believe this.
She's okay.
Coco, come here.
Come on, Coco. Coco's like, my mom's upset. I can tell my mom's talking.
Come here.
Oh, isn't it?
What is bothering you? What is it? I don't know what was in her mouth. Okay, so oftentimes I would get a call in the middle of the night. My dad would call and tell me she was not okay. And so this one particular night I went over and she had gone into diabetic shock. She was naked, she was disoriented, she had flooded the basement. And so I called 911 immediately and we waited. We sat there and waited, and I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know how to help her, and I had never seen her like this. And the EMS arrived and they took one look at her and they said, we cannot lift her. We can't, we got to call the fire department. And having to explain that to my mom, and like the shame that washed over her and washed over me, and we waited until the fire department could come. And to me, that was just such a, she would die 2 years later of obesity. It was just one more blow, like a world that's not made for her.
I just want to go back to that. So the fire department gets there, because like this is the stuff that so the fire department gets there, and what did they do? How did the fire department help her?
Yeah, because they're just more bodies. So when EMS arrives, it's only 2 people, and it could be like a 20-year-old and a 25-year-old lady, and they together weigh 200 pounds, right? You don't know. Firemen are meant
more people to be able to carry her out.
Yeah, fire department men and women are trained to carry heavy loads.
Right.
EMS are not.
Yeah, that's so sad. And that was sad for you. And another story I remember, I hope you're comfortable sharing. I do want to say we're getting comments in on Facebook. We have Tracy from Pennsylvania that says, I have high anxiety and depression, which is dangerous around food. And yes, we do use food as a social gathering. Sandra, talk about the time when you finally reached the point that you were like, I have to do something. You wanted to fly beyond.
Yeah, so that was my last work trip before I went on extended sick leave. I was going to Arizona, and I get on the flight, and I guess I had recently I gained 100 pounds in a little over a year. So it was just rapid weight gain. And I get onto this plane, and oh my God, the seatbelt does not fit. Yeah. Like there's a gap. And I don't know what to do. And I'm not asking for seatbelt extender. Like today it is common practice, but this was over 25 years ago. I'm like, I am not asking for a seatbelt. Like, there's just no way. This is humiliating. So I hide the belt under my belly flap because, they come along and they check. So it appeared. And as you would have it, right? Of course, we hit this terrible turbulence. I mean, I can see the flight attendants, their feet are above ground as they're trying to get to their seat. And I'm just hanging on with everything I've got to the sides of my chair, right? Yeah. Just hanging on. And I'm like, what has my life become to? Honestly, like this is madness. I can't ask for what I need. I can't fit in this seat. I can't manage my life. I was not only scared physically, emotionally, I was enraged. I was just a million miles an hour. It was horrible. It was the longest flight.
Yeah. And so you got home, and how did you start to change your relationship with yourself and with food? Yeah.
So people never believe me, but it was the day I said, I don't care if I ever lose another pound again. I was a compulsive weigher. I weighed myself 3 times a day. I don't know what I expected.
I know. I've been there. But even if it's every morning. Even if it's every morning, I'll be like, what? I don't do it anymore. I'm just like, what do I think is going to be different today than yesterday? What did I do that was so dramatic?
Yeah.
Somehow it's going to be different today than it was yesterday.
So I said, you know what? I am never going to get on the scale again. It doesn't even matter if I ever lose a pound or not. I just can't keep living like this, and I can't keep eating like this. I can't do it anymore. I can't hate myself anymore. No one can change when motivated by shame, guilt, or hate. And I was done with that. I put it away, and I started to
change long term. We can have temporary, right?
Yes.
We can use it for like jet fuel for something temporary, but not long term. You can't have shame and guilt and
and then I stopped dieting. So I'll never go. My tagline is, if you want to gain weight, I have a surefire way. Go on a restrictive diet. We have tons of research to show. And in fact, when you look at it, over 95% of all diets fail. And yet we keep trying. That to me is insanity. Would you get on a plane? We got a 5% chance of landing. Buckle up. Like, no. Yeah. With diets, it's like, sign me up. So maybe it's keto. Maybe it's intermittent fasting. Maybe it's this. Maybe it's that. Yeah. So I just started to eat like a sane person. And then I gave up on the dieting, and I treated my eating like an addiction. And I knew I had trigger foods, and these are foods that I obsessed about. Once I started, it was hard to have a reasonable portion. and would almost always lead to an overeating episode. So it's like, if I could not have those today,
Yep.
then there was a chance I wasn't going to binge.
Yeah.
Because I never binged on Whole Foods. It just.
And let's talk about that though, because I remember when we first, and I loved, you said, I remember listening to you and you were like, you can eat anything as long as it comes from the ground.
Yeah.
Like if it comes from the earth, you can eat it. And I said, I know, but what about mashed potatoes? Like, I love mashed potatoes. And you were like, you can eat them. And I was like, I can eat mashed potatoes. And you're like, Crystal, I've never seen anyone eat a 10-pound bag of potatoes in one sitting, but you will eat a 10-pound bag of chips. Well, not a 10, but you will eat chips, a whole bag of chips, but you wouldn't eat a whole bag of potatoes.
So natural foods react in our body in natural ways, and it allows us to become satiated. With chemically engineered foods, i.e. potato chips, those have been manufactured in a way that you can't stop. It's not funny. Like they say, oh, you can't stop at one. No. They put science and research, and you cannot stop at one. And it's not your fault.
They make it, they design it. It's the same, it's funny. Not funny. I got to start using different words. I have all these books here. We were just talking about.
You're the mad scientist. I love it.
I'm the mad scientist. We were just talking about this book in a course that I was teaching, Quit Like a Woman, the radical choice to not drink in a culture obsessed with alcohol. But it's so interesting because so much of this book is really, it's really about addiction, and whether it's, I think when we can finally realize that whether it's alcohol, whether it was cigarettes, back with one of the women on the call today was saying, I've gone 5 days without smoking. And I said, when did you start? 12, and she's 65. I said, but you got to realize back when you were 12, we were being manufactured. We were being marketed to. They were trying, even alcohol. It's like skinny drinks. Like if you have the skinny margarita, then you'll be, everything is marketing, and even food. When we realize that it is marketed, and what you just said, it's not just marketed to like it. They actually put stuff in the food to make it so highly addictive that it lights up the pleasure part of your brain in 2 seconds.
Exactly. Why? Because they want to get the greatest share of your wallet. How do they get the greatest share of your wallet? You keep coming back for more and more and more.
And that's why, what do we call the show? Enough is never enough.
Yeah, enough is never enough. It's not only not feeling enough, but knowing that when I have my addictive trigger foods, they'll never be enough. There will never be enough. I'll just keep going and going and going. And the next morning I'll wake up and I'll go and go and go, because it'll never be enough.
So it's almost like there's certain things, just like if you're saying I'm struggling with alcohol, the solution really is then you can't drink. Because if you drink, then it triggers the desire for the drink. So it's the same with you. There's certain foods that you're saying, which we have to get our heads around, like, is that restrictive, or how do we change that so that we don't call that a diet then?
Yes, I know. So I get that question very often, right? So I think it's having a shift in perception about what food is. So a Dorito, I know it looks like food, but I promise you it's actually not food. So we're not being restrictive. I'm saying to you, figure out what your trigger foods are, and then eat everything else. Eat till you're satiated. Eat food that you love and that you enjoy. Just make sure it's not a chemical. I'm talking about chemical.
I love that. I love that. I love it. Of every philosophy I've ever had, this is my favorite, is this philosophy. And to think now you're a food addiction counselor. You traveled to, where did you go? Iceland?
Yes, to get my final exam. Yeah. Because apparently food addiction doesn't exist in North America. So I'm accredited in Europe, where it exists there.
Isn't that
crazy to me? Just crazy.
But they have a lot more. They're a lot more on the ball when it comes to food, not just food, but chemicals and organic, and they seem to be just ahead of us.
Well, I spent a month in Italy this summer, and Italy has declared obesity a disease and will provide treatment for it. Canada has not. The United States has not. But Italy had, and then you know what their obesity rate is? 12%. But they're like, we got a handle. We got to get a handle on it.
It's something though, it's interesting. You talk about going to Italy. I went to Italy. I took 25 women and we did a goddess rising retreat in Italy. And
oh my gosh, I wish I had come.
Oh, Sandra, it was so amazing. But here's something I have to say. I think the way they make their food though, I just think their food is different because we ate pasta and bread and drank wine every day. And I think every one of us lost 10 pounds.
Yeah.
The end of the trip. And I didn't do that much walking. I mean, a lot of the women were out walking, but I was like, sort of like, some would go off on that. And I'd be like, well, I'll stay here with the ones that don't want to. Anyways, long story short, we ate bread, pasta, and it was so delicious. And I never got that puffing, bloating.
No,
something
it's not
different.
it's not been chemically engineered. They don't do that in Italy. They are very, I mean, I think times are slowly changing, but certainly when you went, they would never. And I don't know if you ever noticed their bread, it's really crusty and hard. It's not like a fluffy. Yeah,
and they bring in the morning into the hotel, you'd see them bring in the bread would honest to God be like this bit, like wasn't little loaves of bread. It was like one.
No, like the size of you.
Like the size of me, one big piece of bread, and that whole thing would come in. And we,
here's the difference. If that bread was not eaten on the same day, the next day would be as hard as a rock. If you buy a loaf of bread here in Toronto, it could last you 40 days.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah, because of what they're putting into it. So well, it's the same as when you think about fast food. We've all heard those stories about the person who left the hamburger from McDonald's in the car for a year and they went back and it was still looking pretty good. So Sandra, when did you finally decide this is my thing? I'm going to work with people who are struggling with obesity.
So it's so interesting because prior to this, I was on Bay Street and I did the consulting corporate world for 15 years. And then I had my daughter and I knew I was going to be a single mom. And so I couldn't go back to that work-life balance. And I had my very good friend. I mean, she's more than a friend. She's my niece. And I was going to become a life coach. And she says, oh, you're going to coach food addicts. I'm like, no, not me. I can't do that. Don't you know, people want somebody that looks like, a cover girl. Like they're going to expect me to be a bikini model. And they're going to look at me and go, what do you know about recovering from food addict? I can't do it. Like I was adamant. And then so interesting, like the universe just always shows you the way. I just tipped my toe in the pool. Like I just tried a little something. And then all these doors flung open and doctors were coming to me and opportunities were coming to me. And I'm like, whoa, like literally as soon as I cracked the door open, it came rushing to me in ways I could never imagine. I just thought, how will anyone take me serious, right? How I just have this, I'm just a counselor, I'm not a doctor, but yet all of the doctors who are working with people living with obesity say, I can't help everybody. And I don't know why. I don't know why the dietitian, when they tell them the plate divided in half, and why doesn't that work? And I go, because they're addicted to food. And knowledge is not the problem. I'm going to say everybody who's watching right now is intelligent, and you already know what to eat and what not to eat. And exercise is a good idea. So knowledge was never the problem. It was the how. How do I stick to whatever plan works for you and your cultural background? How do you stick to that when you're stressed, when you're lonely, when you're living through a pandemic, when somebody in the family dies? How do I stick to it? That's the secret.
Yeah, and I think I think it's like with anything I was saying to you that I did, and I do it now every year. I do a 90-day alcohol-free challenge because in my family growing up, well, not when I was really little, but just like you, when you're saying you grew up with a mother that was obese and all the food was available. At a certain point in my growing up, I realized it was like have a glass of wine. Everything at the end of the day was have a glass of wine and a glass of wine. And so for me, it was but when I listened to you, I was like, it's all the same. It's all the same. And so I know we're getting low on time, but let's talk about one of the greatest obstacles you talk about is like, we are so hyper-focused on what we put in our mouths.
Aren't we?
We are. We're so mindless. Like we're just mindlessly eating. But I love that you talk about that. You say addictive eating is mindless eating. One of the other things I've heard you say, and I use often now too, is the opposite of addiction is connection. And look at, you said all the people that have I've put on weight through the pandemic, but it's not just the weight, it's that we lost connection.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Right?
The pandemic was the perfect storm. Do you want to make people gain weight? You lock them up, you take away all their resources, you isolate them, and you make them very scared.
Yeah.
You know, right? It was terrifying.
Yeah.
I have so many clients who don't even want to go back to work because they're like, people haven't seen me and I'm embarrassed. I'm like, guess what? They're in the same boat.
Yeah.
I mean, the first 2 weeks of pandemic, everyone was writing a book and running a triathlon, and then we got to the truth of it. Yeah.
Yes. And the reality of everything and then we started to really being able to see, like, how do I cope and where am I mindful in my life and where am I mindless? I'm going to give you the last minute here, Sandra. Our 30 minutes always goes so fast and such a great conversation. We're going to have all your details so that anyone wants to find you, Sandra, we're going to make sure that they can find you, they can connect with you, they can learn more from you. I know you run courses, you run online courses, so we want to make sure that everyone can find you. But I just want to give you the last minute or so to just, what is your overall take? What do you want to say to it? This is for women, for a woman that maybe is struggling, is tired of hating herself, is just tired. Where do we go from here?
Well, I hope everyone goes from never enough to you are enough, and that there is absolutely nothing wrong with you as you are today. And that's where you begin this journey, one step at a time, steeped with self-love, because love is energizing. When we have those self-critical thoughts, they will drain us of energy and motivation. So that's it. You are enough as you are. You woke up this morning, you opened your eyes, you're enough, you're worthy, you're loved.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Next week, we're going to be talking with Sasha Sterling. She's actually one of the first master empowerment coaches to become certified with my school, the SWAT Institute. Hard to believe we opened up in 2009. And watching Sasha rise from this really nervous young mother living out in California, turning into this powerhouse businesswoman now living in Texas has been absolutely incredible. But we're also talking about poverty in a wealthy nation and why women in business are an act of social change. Sasha believes women who make money change the world. You don't want to miss it. Plus, we'd love your help with the best show topics. Maybe we'll even invite you to be a guest. You want to head over to simplywoman.tv. That's it. Just simplywoman.tv. You don't even need the www. Just simplywoman.tv. Join our mailing list. Stay in the loop. It's been my pleasure to connect with you today. Thank you so much, Sandra. We could have talked for another hour.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Again, my name is Crystal Anders Morissette. Take care. I'll see you next week for another episode of simplywoman.tv. Remember, we are for women, by women, and about women.
You are stronger than